Hey everyone, and welcome back to Archie Story Labs. I'm your host, Arshel Branch. Today, you guys, we are going to talk about Steven Spielberg's Disclosure Day. I know you're probably thinking to yourself, Arshel, the movie's already been out. I've done seen several of the commentators' reviews about this movie. I've heard from the Christian, I've heard from the atheist, I've heard just from the Christian Spielberg sci-fi fan. And what new could you possibly bring to this topic, right? Totally get it. But I think there's something more here. I think it's more than just asking, was this a good movie? Because I think that there are multiple ways in which a movie can fail. And to be perfectly honest with you guys, I think, in the Spielberg way, it failed in all those ways. So I thought it was worth talking about. Let's go ahead and let's do that, shall we? All right, you guys, like I said, this movie failed. It's just bad. It's really bad. And there's a multiple of reasons as to why this movie is bad and why it's a tremendous disappointment that Steven Spielberg, this incredible, excellent filmmaker, failed dramatically. My goodness, this was dismal. It was a dismal failure. My goodness, it was atrocious. And I'm stunned and disappointed. I'm clutching my pearls because this movie is just so bad. And before we can even get into that, let me first start with, why the premise of this movie really should have worked. It really should have worked. Now, I know that there are some people who think if you're a Christian, then aliens can't possibly be real. And I really just want to get to this whole topic as to why I don't think that's true at all. Because we first have to look at the definition of what does it mean? What does alien mean, right? Alien is not of this earth, which means angels, demons, not of this earth. That means they can be alien. So the idea that Christians and alien stories can't work, I think, is quite nonsensical. No, angels and demons are not the little green men. Obviously, we're not talking Paul here. We're not talking the aliens out of Independence Day. Okay. We are talking about angels and demons. If angels and demons are not of this earth, then by definition, they are alien. The scripture makes it very clear that we are not alone. Okay. God is a creator of all things. Jesus is the greatest architect in all of everything. I mean, he is the creator of all things, which means if aliens are real, angels and demons, then he created them. We're not alone. I mean, my goodness, that's just scripture by itself. So the idea that Christianity and the idea of science fiction or aliens specifically cannot work together is just not the case. When you look at shows or movies, for example, take Star Wars, right? Come on. What do you think the Force is? Yeah, a whole story here about faith and aliens in a galactic universe working together, living together, trying to fight the greater evil. Like, my goodness, like what do you think that is? Of course, faith can work with science fiction, right? I mean, my goodness, you look at the movie Dune, for example, whether you're looking at the original movie or you're looking at some of the remake work, we're talking about how the idea of holy wars, messiahs, prophecies, what is destiny, where does humanity fit in all of this, what's our role, what's our purpose, all of this is played out in the movie Dune, now the series on HBO Max, which I don't really think is played out there really well, I would say, but you can make that argument effectively. In the story of Dune, this is a huge part. Faith is a huge part of that science fiction.
Take my life, Usul. It is the only way.
I'm pointing the way!
Right? That's just another example. Take Battlestar Galactica. This whole series premise is a theological debate wrapped within the story of a military conflict, right? These two sentient beings at war with each other in space because prophecy says this will happen. And until you've learned your lesson, this is what's going to be the case. There is a plan that no one really understands. There is a leader, a prophet, someone who is going to bring them from this damnation, this war, into a greater world, right? That's President Laura Roslin. She would be your Moses equivalent. And this isn't me trying to be blasphemous. I'm just simply pointing out that in the story of Battlestar Galactica, President Roslin, played by Mary McDonnell, she would be the Moses type, right? She's the Moses archetype character, right? The one that brings these damned people, these enslaved people enslaved to their ways, into a whole new world. By the time you get to the end of the series, it shows that God is real. I mean, that's literally Battlestar Galactica. So the idea that Christianity cannot work in science fiction doesn't really work. Doesn't really make sense to me because it's been there forever. And as far as can Christianity work in science fiction, period? Well, again, with aliens specifically, yeah, actually it can, because we've seen it with Star Wars. You see it even in Star Trek. faith and Christianity playing a role in how we interact with each other, with other alien species, because even the aliens in Star Trek, some of them had their own faiths. Klingons had their own faith. Andorians had their own faith, right? As we see among humans, some of us have our different faiths. There's Muslim, there's Judaism, there's Catholicism, there's even Satanism, right? Everybody got their faith, they got what they believe, and they live according to those beliefs, right? I mean, very much there. And how we interact with each other. What is the meaning of morality, destiny? All of these things are played out in science fiction. So the premise really should have worked here in Disclosure Day, especially because, by Spielberg's own words, he wanted to see how Christianity and the discovery of aliens can work together.
The movie also takes the position of the church. What does this do to the fundamental beliefs that many of us have? And, is God our God only on this planet, or is God a God for every system where there's civilization, intelligent life, and even developing life?
This could have worked. This should have worked. The problem is not that he was asking this question. It's more so that he didn't know what to do with either of it. He didn't know what to do with the mythology of Christianity, if you're just looking at this as a mechanism for storytelling and not as a Christian believer. But ultimately, if you're going to use Christianity and Catholicism as a mechanism for storytelling, then it kind of has to connect to the story you're telling. And he didn't do that effectively, nor did he tell the story of really disclosing the alien to the human race effectively. He really didn't do that the way he did in other movies. The premise should have worked. Christianity and sci-fi, Christianity and alien, these don't have to be mutually exclusive. This should have worked really well. They should have propelled each other into a great story, and it failed dramatically because he didn't know what to do with either of them. Okay. Now, that takes us into the reasons for why this movie is just really bad. Okay. The movie is bad for the right reasons. It's bad for the wrong reasons. It just doesn't quite hit the mark. Okay. So before I get into why Disclosure Day is bad for the right reasons, I'm going to give you guys an example of what bad for the right reasons is. The movie I, Frankenstein. You guys, I don't know if you've seen this movie. This came out over a decade ago. Now, frankly, I enjoy this movie. Okay. I really do enjoy this movie. Really because it's bad for the right reasons. It feels like a bad movie Monday. I enjoy the concept. The premise I thought was fantastic, but it was poorly executed. Okay. It's usually like the technical things that make a movie bad, right? Sometimes the casting is bad. Sometimes there's, weak character development. The emotional stakes are not really believable. The logic doesn't make sense. There's generally a good 20 to 30 minutes missing from the movie. I, Frankenstein kind of fits all of that. The premise was remarkable, right? Let's talk about I, Frankenstein for a second. I, Frankenstein is a movie of, we all know who Dr. Frankenstein is. He reanimates this corpse and this corpse comes alive, and you have Frankenstein's monster, right? That's what you have here. The monster then stumbles upon this supernatural war between demons and gargoyles. Gargoyles would kind of, as we understand them, right? Gargoyles protect the church and they protect mankind. And they are constantly at war with demons. And the whole idea here is, if the demon learns how Dr. Frankenstein brought a corpse back to life, then they can just bring back a bunch of dead bodies and possess the body without having to worry about fighting the soul. So the whole idea here is they are hunting down Frankenstein's monster so they can learn how to reanimate over thousands of corpses that they've collected over centuries so they can raise a demon army. That's the idea here. And the gargoyles are trying really hard to make sure that they are unable to do that. Frankenstein's monster starts hunting demons because, well, I'd rather hunt you and kill you before you try to do the same to me. The premise is fantastic. Problem, however, is by the end of this, Frankenstein's monster gets a soul, and it's not quite clear how that happened. Was it because he felt guilt for killing a gargoyle? Was it because he fell in love with the scientist who was the only scientist that can explain how he's come to existence? But if that's the case, that's just infatuation. Something is missing. The emotional stakes of trying to keep yourself alive, trying to have autonomy over your own future, separate from the gargoyles, separate from the demons, is not really quite clear here. How he obtains a soul at the end of this is not quite clear. So it's missing something. And for that reason, it is bad for the right reasons. Bad movie Monday, I would call it. Okay? The premise is fantastic. The idea that the reanimated corpse of Dr. Frankenstein caught within a supernatural war between demons and gargoyles, because his very existence could be the thing that changes everything in the world. The stakes are incredible if written properly, if executed properly, right? Him obtaining a soul at the end would be more meaningful if I understood why he obtained a soul, right? Premise fantastic, execution not so much. So now you understand what's bad for the right reasons. Disclosure Day, bad for the right reasons. Let's talk about it, okay? This is what I call the Walter Cronkite problem. Spielberg did not make a movie that represents or looks anything remotely like the world that we live in today. He made a movie that was fit for the audiences of Walter Cronkite. The problem with that is, well, he's dead. And the trusting of mainstream media, yeah, it's in a rest in peace gravesite right along with him. Okay. It is not up to the institution to decide whether or not information gets released. Number one. Number two, the fact that everybody would just believe it. The moment fake news was a part of our vocabulary is the moment this movie was no longer able to be respected. Okay. This is a movie fit for the 90s. This is a movie fit for the Bush era. Heck, this is a movie that could have come out during the Obama days when it was under his administration that he said Area 51 is real. Okay. Literally up until 2016 and fake news was a part of our vocabulary, this movie could have been made. But yeah, no, today it lacks because the idea that a whistleblower releases information to cable news, like anybody still watches that, and that everybody would just believe it when you live in a time where we question everything. We question the experts. We question the institutions. We don't trust the government. We don't trust anybody. Everything is up for debate. We are questioning reality itself because of AI. Where the hell is the skeptic? There is not one character that embodies the skeptic, okay? If you really wanted to be interesting in this movie, Mr. Spielberg, you should have had the disclosure from the whistleblower go to Joe Rogan. You should have casted Joe Rogan to play Joe Rogan where the whistleblower, okay, and Emily Blunt starts talking alien in front of Joe Rogan, okay? Because then this might actually be interesting. And then you would have had skeptics question whether or not, is she really speaking alien or is she just making up, babble? Is this real? And no one can really say it's not, or maybe they can. You should have skeptics, and there's not one. We question everything, reality itself, okay? We have people who are literally accusing others, from performers to government officials to other influential voices in podcasting, constantly making accusations and pointing out concerns as to their very own voices and imagery being used in content that they didn't create. Chuck Schumer made an accusation towards President Trump. I didn't say that, he says. Candace Owens says that Turning Point has, used voice AI to manipulate Charlie's voice to make it sound like he said something that he didn't. That's up for debate. There is not one skeptic who was asking this question. Erica Kirk made an accusation that someone used her voice to make it sound like that she was working with Jeffrey Epstein. Okay. I'm not saying that any of that is true. I'm just saying that it is what it is. That's actually what's happening. And there is not one person in this movie that actually says, why should I believe this is true? Okay, so it misses the mark in that regard. Bad for the right reasons because you're trying to appeal to an audience that no longer exists, okay, as it relates to believing the mainstream media. There is not one skeptic in this movie that questions absolutely everything. The debate that should be happening is not whether or not the truth should be revealed, which is the question he's trying to answer, which he already knows the answer to. I'll get into that in the next segment, okay? But the question that really should have been asked is, if a whistleblower is willing to lose everything, willing to risk their name, their career, their families, their very lives to expose a truth, would the people believe it? This is not a question of should or could truth be released, but could and should that so-called truth be believed at all? That's the question. And he didn't answer. He didn't ask that question. Okay. And that takes us into the problem, the bad for the wrong reasons, which is for me, the bigger problem for me. Okay. Being bad for the wrong reasons. That takes us into the last decade, if not longer, to why Hollywood movies have been bad. Okay. I don't care if you're the person on the left making movies, if you're the person on the right making movies. When the point is to just bring me to the conclusion, I got issues with that. Okay. Long story short, for starters, you guys, I remember being told that if I said my favorite part was the end, whether you're talking about a movie or a stage production, if you said your favorite part was the end, sounds like you were saying that you were glad when it's over. It sounds quite disrespectful. And part of what makes things bad for the wrong reasons is when the writers are only thinking about the conclusion. This is no longer about the journey. This is about the conclusion. I'm not trying to bring you on a journey with these characters. I am guiding you to the result, to the conclusion, to the end. And I'm trying to force you to agree with me via the story. A perfect example of this, you guys, would be the movie Captain Marvel. Okay? Perfect example. Because for whatever the reason is, your political agenda, it's most likely been because of the woke agenda, because of yay woman, because the idea that a woman is being told by the institutions and some of the women who don't have faith in themselves, being told that you can't really believe in your full power. I mean, this whole movie was about being yay woman. This whole point was about showing that in spite of the government and women who should support this and the institutional patriarchy trying to keep women from exercising their full power, she discovers her full power and is this amazing, most powerful superhero in all of the Marvel universe. And I'm like, okay, but you knew that from the beginning of this, and that was the movie you chose to make, that it wasn't really about discovering that she had this power, realizing that she was so powerful. The whole point was so that way she could just be this powerful almighty being for the end of the movie. Like, that's all this was. And so you don't really believe it. You don't really accept it. You don't really love it. You don't even like this character by the end of this movie. And her, antics throughout the interviews didn't help either. But ultimately, this was a yay woman kind of philosophy. And it's not so much, again, about your politics, because Daily Wire is guilty of this as well from the conservative side. Again, you're so eager to just get to the end about how much of a lunatic ideology the woke is. And so for that reason, this is the movie that I'm making, that you sacrifice in the things that mattered the most. And this is bad for the wrong reasons. That it's not only just that you're bad for the right reasons, the lack of execution in character development, plot development, story development, right? But that this entire movie was just a freaking psyop. And that, again, disclosure day. What's the problem with this movie is that you didn't just give me bad for the right reasons. You are trying to manipulate me as a Christian. The whole point of you making this movie, Mr. Spielberg, was to get me to question my faith in Jesus, for you to undermine the authority of Jesus Christ. And that is the problem, that this was a sad, sorry excuse of a manipulation of Christians, okay? That if you're a Christian who is questioning your faith by the end of this movie, I'm questioning your intelligence, because that's how bad this movie was. Okay. They were trying to manipulate you. They didn't ask the question, well, what if aliens existed, which is a better question. I mean, not the movie I still would have made, but still, better question. Instead, he's trying to force feed you, no, aliens are real, the government lied, and you just better agree. That's this movie. Okay. Because if aliens are real, then is Jesus real? And is Jesus the God of all gods, the King of all things, the King of all kings, the creator of all things? Is this really true if aliens are real? Because nowhere in the scripture does it say the word alien. Like, alien doesn't have a definition. What are we doing here? This was atrocious, okay? Bad for the right reasons, bad for the wrong reasons, bad for the right reasons. This was a movie made for Walter Cronkite's audience, and we watch Candace Owens, Joe Rogan, and the Peabody podcast, okay? Mofo, Mr. Spielberg, we watching Ann Coulter on Substack, okay? My goodness, we watch the Young Turks on YouTube, okay? There's such a thing as streamer awards, for goodness sakes. What world do you think you're living? Again, he did not give us a world that we live in. He gave us a world that he thinks he lives in. But only Spielberg could deliver a shit show like this. My goodness, it's that bad. It is that freaking bad, okay? It's easy to make a movie that's bad for the right reasons, okay? And to make a movie that's bad for the wrong reasons, that too is easy. But to make a movie that is bad for both, now that takes real talent. Oscar-winning talent, as I see today. I've seen people say this movie is going to be the worst movie of the decade, I think, prior to The Odyssey with Nolan coming out. Yeah, you can honestly say that. Before The Odyssey, Nolan's Odyssey, you could honestly say that. Mr. Spielberg, I've given you what I would have done with this movie. First of all, I would have casted Joe Rogan to play Joe Rogan. I would have had this be a major debate. But really, if you wanted to be interesting and have this actually reflect society and reality, well, you should have made a comedy, okay? I'm thinking Mars Attacks, right? The aliens of Mars, they're alive, they're here, they're real, they pretend like they're friendly with everybody. Next thing you know, Glenn Close becomes a decorative corpse. All of the Congress is wiped out. Human beings, being quite ridiculous, are not just panicking, they're debating. In real life, Yeah, nah, people would be debating whether or not this is real or not. X would crash. People would be freaking out. Somebody would create a supplement on how to deal with the panic. You'd be taking antidepressants everywhere. Nobody would go to work. Everybody would die except for Tom Jones. At the end of all of this, like in Mars Attacks, everybody dies except Tom Jones. Mr. Spielberg, if you really wanted to reflect reality, you should have just made another Mars Attacks, because even that would be more realistic. Because Mars Attack is more realistic to Disclosure Day in today's society. Because, hello, people are releasing information about aliens and people are debating. No one really, not 100% of the people agree. The question you should have asked is not whether or not could or should truth be revealed, but if truth is revealed, would you believe it? And drama or comedy, this could have been fantastic. And because you were so eager to manipulate Christians and not realize the reality in which you live, where everybody questions absolutely everything, even reality itself, you totally missed the mark. Okay. It's not a question of information being released anymore. It's a question of trust, period. Can I trust the source in which this information is released? And what does that look like? Let's say it is true. Let's say a whistleblower risked everything to get information out via the podcasters and the influencers, not just cable news media, okay? Because that's just bogus, but across platforms, cable news included, because they're still here, but across platforms, across different voices, a multitude of voices with the alternative spins and the questioning of reality. The true danger here is that because this is true, which is what you were trying to explain in this movie, because when someone says there is a threat that could be the alien, that could be the government, that could be your neighbor, and you are not sure, well, that's the reason you get got. And that should have been the movie you made. It would have been more interesting, drama or comedy. You would have appreciated the world and that you actually live in. There would be the skeptic, there would be the debate, and in the middle of the debate and the skepticism, the whole idea here is it is true. The government did lie, and aliens are real. And how does that affect the reality in which we live? But we can't even talk about it because nobody believes it. That would have been more interesting. And that is a movie he should have made. Guys, think about Spielberg's work, okay? Jurassic Park is not about dinosaurs, okay? It is about human arrogance, but so is Jaws. E.T., it is not just about a little lost alien. It's about loneliness and the importance of connecting beyond differences. The premise creates the world and therefore the story, but the people, they kind of really make the story. Why? Because you're discovering right along with them. And he lacked that tremendously. And so get in the comment sections and let me know what you think about all of this. Do you think this movie is bad for all of the reasons that I just listed? It's not like, is this movie good? Is this movie bad? No, this movie is bad. It's definitely bad. And I've given you all the reasons why. Let me know in the comment sections. Do you think I added anything new to this? I really want to know. Let me know in the comment sections. I love you guys so much. God bless. Have a great night. And of course, because it's me, Kepla.